Welcome to the Coaching Edge podcast with your co-hosts, Dr. Steve Jeffs and Erwin de Grave. Each episode, we bring you expert guests and transformative coaching insights. Let's dive in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Coaching Edge podcast with your co-host, Dr. Steve Jeffs, and myself, Erwin de Grave. And today we have the pleasure to talk to Dr. Irena O'Brien. Hello, Irena. How are you doing?
Hi there. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Thank you for taking some time out to talk to us and to everybody else. So, Irena, we could try to introduce yourself, but you're the person who knows yourself much better than we do. So, who is Irena? What she does in coaching? So just please tell a little bit more about you.
Yeah. So I'm a cognitive neuroscientist, and I teach coaches about the neuroscience of change. And why I do that is because all behavior change is brain change. So if you don't know how the brain works, you're not sure that what you're helping your clients do is really consistent with how the brain works. And I don't know if I should say this now, but I also have a podcast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
my neuroscience of coaching. And it's in the top 10% of podcasts in the world.
Oh, so we have to aspire to that, Steve.
Absolutely. No pressure for us. I love it. I love it.
So how did you get into coaching, if I may?
After I finished my PhD, I was a mature student when I did my PhD because I had an earlier career. I was an accountant, a chartered accountant for quite a few years, for many years actually. And then I went back and I got my PhD. When I first went to, in my first semester back at university, I took my first neurobiology, my first neurobiology course, and I was blown away. It was so fascinating that I went on to do a PhD, and I did neuropsychology, and then I did brain imaging studies and electrophysiological studies. So that's why I am. Oh, and after that, I thought, okay, so what do I do next? So I did take a coaching course, but I'm an introvert, so I'm a big introvert. So it was always hard to get clients as an introvert. But really what I loved most was the brain. I loved talking about it. I love writing about it. I love teaching about it. And it is simpler than you think. I mean, the research is complicated, but the lessons from it are simple to learn. And so my goal is to make it practical.
Love it. And what's catching your attention? I mean, neuroscience is a big field. There's a lot going on. What's top of mind for you in this field at the moment?
Really, what I'm really focused on right now is Richard Boyatzis' research and coaching in the brain. His research is fascinating. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is science. It makes a lot of sense, and I think coaches really need to know about this.
What do you
because
think
it's going to change the whole field. What they need to know is that you really need to, when you're working with clients, you really need to toggle between their vision and their tasks or their plan for their tasks. And you need to toggle. And so the vision activates the default mode network in the brain. The default mode network in the brain is where self-reflection happens. It's also imagination. It's where your vision lives. So you need to toggle between the default mode network and the central executive network. And that's the planning network. That's the task network. And in fact, you should be spending about 2/3 of the time in the default mode network rather than in the central executive network, because the default mode network also activates the parasympathetic nervous system, right, which restores energy. The central executive network activates the sympathetic nervous system, which is the stress response, and it consumes it.
Where do most people tend to spend most of the time in today's sort of modern society, from your perspective?
I think people spend most of their time in the default mode network because that is a that is a self-reflective network, but you want to also be in a positive emotional state, right? He calls it a positive emotional attractor, which is a self-sustaining system that just activates a series of positive emotions. And that is really the driver of change.
If it's not the positive emotional attractor, like what's the other side? Is it as simple as negative, or is there
It is. Yeah, it's a negative emotional attractor. And that also attracts like a negative type of emotions like anxiety and defensiveness. Right. But most coaching, I think, focuses on the central executive network, right? The tasks, the plan for the task. And yet, even if a client comes to you for compliance purposes, they still have a vision of what they want to be in the world. And can you see how when you activate that, it can change the whole flavor of the coaching?
I can see this through my own experiences in coaching and teaching coaching. I see a lot of new coaches go real quick. What's your topic? What's the solution? What are your options? You know, they kind of move through the grow model in very a linear fashion in many cases. And I find that at best, there's a superficiality to that. And what I'm hearing is that there's a opportunity for a step to shift, you know, to the default, the imaginary, to step towards positive emotional attractors, to, in my words, correct me if I'm wrong here, but then there's additional resources, there's energy, there's something that shifts. And from that higher, different place, that now there's some creativity that's not connected to if you just go straight to how do I solve the problem. Am I in the right space?
You said that well.
Awesome.
Yeah, you are in the right space. Yeah, so that's the one.
I was just going to say, I really love that because I've seen this for years. I've described this in practical terms, sometimes emotional terms, but there's something about that. Well, actually, here's what's going on and here's why that works. The explanation, the understanding behind the observation, which is the essence of science when I hear myself say it.
Yeah, I mean, you want to get the client excited, right? About what they're accomplishing with you. And if you're staying in the central executive network, it's also called a task positive network, then that's not an exciting place to be. That's work, right? It's a bit like drudgery, you know. I mean, it's still important to do, right? You still have to do that, but they should be spending. You should be encouraging that excitement, and so that creates that drive, that pull to make those outward changes. But true transformation happens in the default mode network, right? So in that vision, because that is a self-reflective network, right? And so that is transformation.
And is this where the positive emotional attractor is sitting? Or is that
Yes.
sitting? That's sitting. And the negative, where is the negative sitting?
In the central executive network.
Oh, that makes it much clearer for me. So and where people more sit is in the executive, where the negative emotional attractor is. That's
Yeah.
so easy for people to be more negative than positive because it's more difficult to be for them more to be in the other side. Is that correct?
Is it more? Are you saying is it more difficult to be in the central executive than in the
No, is it more difficult to? It's easier for people to be more, as you said, in the task environment and do things.
Yeah, in our Western society, yeah, absolutely. Right. And I mean, all these performance coaches, you know, Western society, especially, you know, in executives, it's all about performance and more productivity. So they're living in the central executive network. It's stressful. They're living in the sympathetic nervous system. And there are health consequences to living in the sympathetic nervous system. We need to be balancing those two systems.
And how can we do that?
The positive emotional attractor, right? By having them identify with their vision. So whenever things get too heavy, you bring them back into their positive emotional attractor. And Boyatzis says that you really need 2 instances of being in the positive emotional attractor for every 1 instance of being in the negative emotional attractor. So you should be spending more time talking about their ideal selves, about their vision, that kind of thing, versus just versus their tasks, their plans for tasks, things like that.
Is that specific to coaching, or is that applied to leadership and life as well?
It applies to leadership and life too. So his book doesn't just talk about coaching; it's also about organization. Of course, since I teach coaches, I just focused on the coaching part, so I can't really tell you. I mean, I can imagine what it is, right, for organizations, but leaders should be doing the same thing. Leaders should be inspiring their teams, and they would do it. They would do it in the same way. And then there's also emotional contagion. But Steve, you know the emotional contagion.
Absolutely, I heard a great phrase.
Yeah.
Leaders are the emotional thermostat of the team, and I think that that's a language that I found leaders get it. So, well, it's emotional leadership when you kind of sit down. We lead, how we show up influences those around us. Actually, whether we're in a position of power or hierarchy or not, although it can be amplified when we're the boss.
Exactly, and it's our inspiration that inspires our team, and so that's how you can help them get into the positive emotional attractor, and then also help them identify what like their ideal selves. What do they want to be? What kind of vision do they have?
That's what I see when I listen between the two spheres. It's like the difference also between a leader and a boss. The boss is
Yeah.
more focused on tasks, and a leader is more in that positive, in the vision, in the dreams, and I lead the team towards where a boss is more needs to be executed and we need to get this done. Am I correct?
But I think a boss could still do that, right?
Okay.
And he would get more out of his team than if he doesn't. But his team would be more positive. They would be living in the positive emotional attractor more than the negative emotional attractor.
All
It
right.
sounds like there's a lot of talk about engagement and thriving and how to inspire people. Then, of course, there's cultures that push us towards task outcome. One practical thing that I'm hearing, and I'm very biased to this, is that we can start to inspire change by leading ourselves differently. If I can recognize what's going on for me, if I can create habits and shifts and ways that I can spend more time, connected to that positive emotional attractor, then I can have a different influence on the people around me.
Exactly. That's emotional contagion, right? And so that's one of the ways that you can help your clients get into that, identify with that vision, and get into the positive emotional attractors by yourself being in that state.
I really love that. There was a sneaky subject change in what you said. And what I heard you speaking to is actually how we are being and how, as coaches, how we show up has an
Yes.
influence on how our clients are also showing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is so important. And I hear, from students sometimes, oh, well, what about rapport? Well, rapport is important, but rapport is different, right? It's not emotional contagion. In emotional contagion, it's the coach that drives the emotion in the room, whereas rapport is you're just matching the client's emotion, right? But you want to be driving it.
If many people describe coaching as being client-led, how does that fit when now the coach is leading the emotion of the conversation?
I mean, if a client comes and they come into the room and they're stressed and they just can't get themselves, their mind is racing. I mean, it's your job to bring them back to a state where they can even start to work, right? And so that is largely through emotional contagion. So it's still client-led in the sense that you're helping them identify what it is that they want, right? What vision they want and how they're going to get there. So it is still client-led. You're just facilitating it, right? And yeah.
I love how you said that. There's a way that we can get lost in what it means to be led by the client. And what was really clear in your answer there, which I love, is, well, it's the client's vision, it's the client's topic, it's what the client wants to get out of coaching. That's the direction that we're going, not their current emotional state. And so when we have that clarity, well, if this is where we want to go and I can connect to the emotion, the energy that's going to serve us to progress in that direction together, then I'm missing out an opportunity to hold that back or to not do it.
Exactly.
I see also that certainly for coaches who start off, that you do not need to know the answer or to be the experienced person, but if as long as you can lead with the positive change, your positive emotion and energy, you can really read and guide the client where it needs to go.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then there's also compassion, right? Clients come in and a lot of them will beat themselves up over the fact that they're still doing the same thing over and over again that's not working. And so compassion Boyatzis also talks about compassion, but compassion, helping the client with self-compassion is hugely important, because without compassion, there really is no change until they relax, right, into the fact that, well, no, it's not their fault. It's the way their brain was built. That's why they keep doing these same things over and over again, right? And brain is built from past experience.
Hmm. So, to be more effective, practical also for coach, how can they prepare to be in a positive emotional attractor, as you mentioned? What can they do before they get into a coaching session?
They have to be in touch with their own vision first, right? They have to be in touch with their own vision and their own vision, their own ideal selves. And that's going to transfer over to the client. That is the main way. And then also they have to make sure that they resource themselves, right? So whatever it takes to, I guess they call it self-care now, right? So whatever it takes to bring yourself back to the center, right? Rather than being off in your anxious mind. So in other words, the coach has to be very aware of their own emotional state and try and bring it back to the center and into their own vision and ideal self, so that then they can help the client do that. It's easier then to help the client do that. I mean, imagine going to see a coach that's just plainly just excited about what they do.
Yeah. Exactly.
Contagious. Absolutely. I love the lead by example, the role modeling concept of here. So, well, actually, as leaders and coaches, well, we're human too. And when we know what works for humans, then for us to pay attention to that and give ourselves permission to do what works, to allow us to be in a place of greater resourcefulness in service of others, it makes so much sense when we sort of say it like that. Yet it's something we forget to do as we get busy with all of these other things in life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But as a coach, you have to be aware of that all the time, right? That's your job.
And it's not easy all the time.
No.
So what can they do to be really, because you need to be self-aware. And I think when you're sitting in a coaching session with a client, it's not only what I understand what you're saying is not only listening what the client is talking about, but you need to listen to your own emotional state at that moment and make the necessary corrections.
Yep, exactly. And you also need to make sure that you're sleeping well, right? Because diet, exercise, and sleep play a huge role in our emotional state. So you need to be sleeping well, you need to be eating well, you need to be exercising, right? So you need to be taking care of yourself so that you'll be in the best emotional state, not just for your client, but for yourself.
Yeah.
And then use tools to bring yourself, if you're anxious, use tools to bring yourself down, like heart rate variability training, right? Breathing, which will bring you back into the parasympathetic nervous system.
Tell us a little bit more about heart rate variability. I love it. It's really cool, but it's not something that many people are aware of.
So most people, I mean, everyone knows about heart rate, and so people think that the heart beats at a steady beat, but it doesn't. It's faster on the in-breath and slower on the out-breath. And if you've ever taken your pulse and just paid attention to it, you can see it, right, in the pulse. And so heart rate variability training is, you can use an app, but basically it is long, slow, deep breaths. So about 6 breaths per minute. And when you do that, and the out breath should be at least as long as the in breath. There are various methods of breathing, but really the out breath should be at least as long as the in breath, because the in breath activates the sympathetic nervous system, the out breath activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So when you're breathing in this way, where your in breaths match, or your out breaths match your in breaths, then you're putting your system into balance, right? So you got sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic, parasympathetic. And when you're working on something and you're a bit anxious or stressed, you should still try and breathe in that way. It just might be faster than 6 breaths per minute, but ideally to have the in breath and the out breath, so that you have a nice sine wave. And heart rate variability is measured as the difference in the beats between the in breath and the out breath. And the bigger the difference, the better. And heart rate variability predicts death from all causes. As we get older, our breaths tend to be shallower, and we have more in breaths. Like a lot of us will breathe like, right? So our in breaths will be big and our out breaths will be little. So training yourself to breathe, have long, deep breaths, about 6 per minute, is really big. And then that calms the system, right? Because when you're anxious, like, you can't change the mind with the mind. You can't just will yourself to not be anxious. And so you have to use other tools. One of them is heart rate variability. Take a walk in nature. Nature is also a source of resourcing ourselves.
And exercise as well.
Music. Yeah. Exercise and music also. Right? Find some relaxing music that you like, and that will also help.
So again, so simple. The breathing exercises is, something I teach to leaders, just to, in between meetings, as you step out of one, just take a moment, recenter, reconnect, finish that, give yourself presence in a space before you start what's next. And I was at an executive retreat recently, and we were introducing them to heart rate variability with monitors where they could track and monitor. And it was kind of cool. I love biofeedback and being able to see what we're experiencing and kind of loop that in to be able to do more and more of it. And competitive executives, interesting watching how hard they were competing to be relaxed more, and the sort of paradox of working hard to work less.
Yeah, it is interesting when you start tracking it, right? And then you start practicing, and then you can see where it's going, and how sometimes you're still breathing at 6 breaths per minute or about that, but your heart rate variability is not very good, because underneath you're still kind of anxious. So you really also have to try and I was just saying, you can't change the mind with the mind, but focus on something positive at the same time.
So
It's
what do
easy
you
to
think?
focus on the negative.
So because think about positive, and a lot of coaches and in personal development, they talk about vision boards.
Yeah.
So having something like an image or like a board with positive images, could that help very also for people very quickly to switch from a negative to a positive?
It depends if that works for you. A vision board never worked for me. I always found that artificial.
Mm.
But some people really like it. So if it works for you, then use it. But it's not necessary. You really want to get in touch with your own vision, which is not out there on a board, right? It's more it's about values. Yeah, it's about values and deeper meaning.
Mm.
That's something profound about what you said. I saw a connection I hadn't seen before, especially in the context of this conversation. As coaches, we'll often work with values, with vision, or with strengths, or with unique resources of the client. And, we know that that helps them be resourceful, but actually what I'm hearing in our conversation today is that it's essential as a strategy to help us and to help our clients to reconnect to that place where they're most creative, that place where we can come back to rebalance all of everything that's going on around us, and that it's not just a really cool thing, it's not just a great activity or a tool, but it sounds really central and important to what we're asking from people going forwards.
It is essential, and it's going to help them create the change that they want. And the other thing too about once you start focusing, because I mean, at some point you do have to get to tasks, right, and plans. But you should look at that as a learning opportunity, right, rather than just a task that I have to do, right? So a learning opportunity, and so that changes the flavor of it also. But because I've been guilty of, like, there's some like, I love what I do, but there are some days where I forget that I love what I do, and it's such a drudge. Like when you're trying to get that article out, and I forget that no, I have to bring myself back to, like, why am I doing this? I'm not doing this just to get this article out, right? I have a bigger vision than that, and it changes everything when you connect to that.
Yeah,
Asking yourself why you do things.
Yes.
Mm.
excellent,
Mm.
excellent.
And it takes work, right? Because our brain is focused on the negative.
And why
And
is
and
that?
and that is because in evolutionary times it saved our lives, right? If we were always on the lookout for a predator, someone from another tribe that we didn't know who could be dangerous. So our brains are just wired that way. And so it does take effort. And it is, and yet, being in touch with a positive emotional attractor, right? That also activates dopamine, which is what the feel good
Mhm.
neurotransmitter or hormone, and that leads to even more progress or better progress.
Mm. I hear it's like practice and practice and practice, like the physical practice. When you want to get in physical form, you need to practice and you need to put the commitment to do it. And it's the same with positive and from negative to positive. You need to train it. It's not there. You need to go for it.
Yes, it's not that you need to stay in there, right? Because it can be hard because our tendency is to go into the negative. The
Hmm.
important thing is to keep bringing yourself back
Okay. Mm. And know when you have to go back.
and know when you have to bring yourself back. Yeah. And as a coach, you help your clients do that in the coaching session. And hopefully that they can even use those techniques that you're helping them with when they're on their own. And like simple heart rate variability, music, nature,
Mm. Breathing,
breathing. Yeah.
conscious, chosen breathing, not
Yes.
just the default that that choice is different. And of course, as you've been saying, emotional connection, when we as coaches help ourselves to shift and we invite others to do the same as our clients, then they get to go out and positively impact all the people around them in different ways as well. I love that.
It's what
Yeah.
they use in sales as well. So if you look at shops that put music on the book, an environment that is for the person who comes there in a kind of a positive environment to say, oh, I'm going to buy.
Yes, but they're being manipulative, right? Restaurants that
That's
play
something
loud
else, yeah.
music, yeah, they're being manipulative so that you'll spend more.
Yeah, but you could
Yeah,
use
but
the
it
same
does work.
principles in the coaching session with a client to generate like some nice
Yeah.
music, and so on to generate it.
Yeah, you can. I mean, you can also use like inspiring music, right? Or energizing music. And it works with exercise also, right? The energizing kind of like the groove with the heavy beat.
All these different ways of doing it. Brilliant. There's a lot of deep reflection, a lot of deep thought. I enjoyed this conversation. For those that do want to learn more, that have been sparked as an interest or a curiosity, how can people learn more about the things we've been talking about, learn more about you and your work?
They can go to neuroscienceschool.com. I have an e-booklet, 10 neuroscience strategies that they can use right away. There's blog articles, and I have written an article on this, what we were talking about today, that doesn't go into as much depth as what we talked about today. And then there's my Neuroscience of Coaching podcast, and you can get that wherever you get your podcasts.
There you go. And hopefully we're up there close on the list somewhere. Otherwise,
you can check it. You can check it.
Otherwise,
All right,
we'll
Irena, thank you very much for this exciting topic and talking about neuroscience, which is really, really important. So thank you very much for taking your time and sharing some insights and pieces about it.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And thank everyone for listening. And until next time, goodbye. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to The Coaching Edge. Until next time, keep coaching and keep growing.